I'm here with author and U.S. Army chaplain James Darren Key, who highlights 40 lessons and stories about race, love, honor, and faith to inspire people during changing times in his new memoir, A Long Way from Crenshaw, Lessons and Stories about Race, Love, Honor, and Faith for These Changing Times. How you doing today, Dr. Key?
I'm doing very well, Ryan. Thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate the work you've been doing, and it's an honor to be here today.
It's an honor to have you here as well. One of the things I really noticed about the title of your book, A Long Way from Crenshaw. So you grew up in California in the 70s and 80s. Crenshaw later became legendary in pop culture because of films, like Boys in the Hood and rappers like Ice-T and much later Nipsey Hussle. What was it like growing up in Crenshaw during that era, and what have been some of the biggest changes?
Well, I think in the 70s and 80s, Crenshaw, I unofficially called the Crenshaw district the unofficial capital of South Central Los Angeles. And I think it's really the heartbeat of Los Angeles. South Central Los Angeles is pretty huge, and it ranges from Watts to Compton all the way, and then right into the core South Central. And then I always like to say that the last stop in the hood or in South Central Los Angeles is the Crenshaw district. And the Crenshaw district was vibrant, a lot of energy. It's the one place in South Central Los Angeles that you really get a cross-section of African-American people in terms of economic levels. So you'll have as high as folk who live in the legendary Baldwin Hills and in that exclusive area, African-American people, and then middle class, and then lower middle class and lower, if you will. And so it really encompasses a little bit of everybody in the hood. But it also, is known for challenges too. When I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, gang violence was present, and you had kind of a drug presence on some level, and just some of the daily challenges of an inner city were present. You also had elders in the community that were looking after the young folk. You also had a vibrant church community. You also had, Boy Scouts. It had everything that a normal neighborhood would have and should have. But it was tough when you're growing up and you are easily influenced by the crowd, or easily influenced by, the boys in the hood. It's easy to get caught up. And a lot of brothers and sisters, and even myself at certain times in my journey, when I should have made a right turn, made a left turn. And so, you're blessed if you have a supportive family and you have people in your circle who can kind of pray you back on track, or scare you back on track, or get you back on track by hook or crook. And so when you talk about kind of the explosion, I think in the 90s, the rap music kind of put South Central and Crenshaw district on the map on a different level. And so that was interesting to see at that point in the 90s, when, let's say, NWA really took off, late 80s, early 90s. I was working on Capitol Hill at that time for Congresswoman Maxine Waters in Washington, D.C. And so, but the Crenshaw district is near and dear to my heart because it's a magical place. It's home. It's where I got started. It's where I learned some valuable lessons. And so the Crenshaw community back then was special, with challenges. And even today, now what you see, as you see in a lot of cities across the nation, is this, the community's kind of turning over. And you've got, at one point, the Crenshaw district was predominantly white. And then African Americans moved in to that area in the 60s, late 50s, 60s. And now you have this kind of return of non-Black folk, mostly white, who are kind of coming back into that area. And you see this across the country in many urban cities. Folk who once moved to the suburbs are now want to return back to some of our inner cities. And the very people who live there, as they kind of refurbish homes and sell homes that are up for sale because kids, you know, maybe a family inherited a home from their parents and they live someplace else. They sell the home, refurbish the home, sell it at a very high price. And the very people who live in, for example, the Crenshaw district and other major cities across the country can't afford to purchase those homes or don't want to return home or live there. And so you see the community kind of flipping, if you will. And so this has created some challenges and tension as well.
Yeah, and you read about, you know, situations like, you know, with the Baldwin Hills Mall. Like, I guess, like, you know, people from the community were interested in purchasing the Baldwin Hills Mall, but they were outbidded by, like, you know, someone from Russia who, like, you know, is going to purchase the mall, I guess, like, you know, and you know, situations like that seem very, very sad. So, like, growing up though in Crenshaw, where'd you go to high school? Did you go to Dorsey or Crenshaw High?
I went to Dorsey High. You've been doing your research, man. And yes, so I went to Dorsey High. Dorsey and Crenshaw, big rivals. Dorsey High and Crenshaw High have, Dorsey is much older than Crenshaw High. And so Dorsey has alumni like Shalimar, at least Jody Watley and Jeffrey Daniel went to Dorsey High. The Fifth Dimension, a couple of members, Marilyn McCoo is a graduate of Dorsey High School. And Dorsey High School was full of energy. There was nothing like the battle between Dorsey High School and Crenshaw or football or basketball. Most of us went to the same middle school, Audubon Junior High. And so at Audubon Junior High, it almost seems as if half of the kids went to Dorsey and the other half went to Crenshaw. So we all know each other. We all live in the same neighborhood. And Crenshaw and Dorsey are the two public high schools in the Crenshaw district.
And I was looking at your credentials. You know, you attended Princeton, you know, Howard University, in the divinity programs. Were you a good student at Dorsey, or, like, you know, was that something developed later?
Well, at Dorsey, no, it developed much later. I was, you know, I got into college I like to kid my kid folk and say, you know, the janitor left a window open and said, come on in here and sit down and don't say anything. I went to undergrad at California State University in Northridge. High school at Dorsey High, for me, it wasn't about academics. It was all about the social life. And it was all about being cool and not paying a lot of attention to my grades. And this is really pathetic. My mother's a school teacher. And so I knew better, but I just didn't commit myself to the academic process. And so I wasn't a choir boy, if you will, or a gang member. I was someplace kind of in the middle and had the dubious distinction of being suspended from middle school and being suspended from Dorsey High for not going to school, hanging out with my buddies on the corner. You know, got picked up by the police and taken to the police station and you know, back to school. And so those were some of the challenges, and it kind of showed. By the time I graduated from high school, my GPA wasn't high at all. Got into college because of a program that recruited kids that they thought had potential to do well in school. Took advantage of that program, got into California State University in Northridge, and still didn't have the party out of my system, still didn't have my study habits. My study habits were not solid. Still didn't fully commit myself to the process. It was still about the social aspect of being in college. If I was able to get a grade for just socializing on campus, I would have had an A+. And finally the school said enough is enough. You know, you're not serious. So you need to sit out a semester. We need to put you out. And you need to figure out what you're going to do. And it was at that moment that I began to reflect on some words that were given to me years ago, really during my high school years, by a man by the name of Mr. Smoot. And I think I write about this in my book, In a Long Way from Crenshaw. And Mr. Smoot he worked as a custodian at McDonnell Douglas Aerospace Company. And he was a custodian. On the side, he cut lawns and he cut our lawn. And he liked to, whenever he saw young people, he liked to preach, as we would say, or like to lecture us. And we didn't pay a lot of attention to Mr. Smoot because Mr. Smoot kept a half pint of gin in his back pocket. And so we didn't take him seriously. And but he took what he was doing very seriously. And so his mission in life, it was like, I may not have much, but you got to take it to the next level. And so we would always try to hide from Mr. Smoot. If we were leaving the home and we saw Mr. Smoot cutting the lawn in the front yard, we'd sneak out the back so we didn't have to deal with him and listen to one of his lectures or sermons, if you will. But one day he cornered my brother and I, and he was really serious this day. And I never will forget, it was a summer day. The sun was beaming down on his head, there's grass on his face and his hair. And he looked at my brother and I, and he began to tear up. And he was really serious this day. And he looked at my brother. My brother at the time was a student at USC. And he told my brother, when you graduate from USC, the University of Southern California, with your degree, that's my degree too. And then he looked at me and said, when you graduate from high school and you receive your diploma, that's my diploma too. That your success is my success. That your failure is my failure. If you succeed, I succeed. If you don't succeed, I don't succeed. Society may not get any better, but you've got to get better. And I'm telling you, I remember hearing his words then, but it didn't make sense until maybe a few years later when Northridge said, you need to sit out a semester. And his words began to haunt my spirit. That I thought about, you know what, I'm just not going to return. I'm not going back. I'm just going to do something different. Get a job in the neighborhood and kind of do my thing and ride around the neighborhood and, and just kind of do something that was less challenging. But his words really haunted my spirit, haunted my soul, and compelled me to understand that the journey wasn't just about me. It's about all those individuals, all of those foot soldiers from yesterday, those heroes and sheroes who couldn't go to school, the heroes and sheroes who had to drop out of school early to take care of their family, or couldn't go to school because of their skin color, or couldn't go to school because during the time, their parents' time, it was against the law, or blacks couldn't, African Americans couldn't go to predominantly white institutions and couldn't afford to go to black ones, to your historic black college and universities. Had other challenges that prevented them from succeeding, from going forward. And my responsibility at this particular time, and we're talking about the mid-'80s, was to kind of come to the conclusion that it's not just about you. And I'm sorry that, and I tell my kids this, I have two kids in college, one about to graduate from Grambling State University, my daughter's at the University of Kansas. And I tell them both this, that I'm sorry to lay this rap on your shoulders, but this journey is bigger than you, and it's on your shoulders. You got to carry the baton. You got to take it to the next level. At some point, I will be off the scene, and you will be on the stage of life, and the music will be playing. How will you dance? How will you perform? And I'm going to give you everything I can to make sure you bring the house down. But it's up to you to dance. It's up to you to commit yourself to the process. And I hadn't committed myself to the process. And his words, and you talk about, going to graduate school at Princeton Theological Seminary and Howard University, Howard School of Divinity. And I have met some very, very distinguished professors and have worked on Capitol Hill and have walked the halls of Congress and have met some influential folk along the way. But I'm telling you, Mr. Smoot's words had a profound impact on my life. This janitor with limited education did not graduate from high school. I don't know how far he went in terms of school, but he took care of his family. He had a nice home. He got up early in the morning, went to work, and yet he had a bottle of gin in the back of his pocket. But so what? What he said was so important and had a huge impact on my life. And even to this day, I still hold on to his words. During my time in the military, it's been almost 18 and a half years. And along the way, there've been some times when I wanted to say, you know what, I need to maybe do something different. Or, you know, after my year in being deployed to Baghdad, Iraq, maybe the military, maybe I need to find another way to do ministry, to do the work I've been called to do. His words haunted my spirit. And he said, society may not get any better, but you've got to get better. And your success is my success. To the extent that we can embrace our ancestors, to the extent that we can connect our present struggle to yesterday's struggle, I think it will, certainly did for me, kind of gave me an extra boost, if you will, of energy, and committed me in a very significant way to the process. And once I realized that the journey, that there were other folks traveling down the dusty road of life with me, it compelled me to commit myself fully to the process.
So like you talk about committing to the process, and like I
Yes.
guess after you drop out of California Northridge, like, you know, how soon before you were able to commit to the process?
Well, I sat out a semester, went to summer school, and I went to summer school at West Los Angeles Community College. And that's where I really kind of spent that summer there. And I took 2 courses, a speech course, a psychology course, and got A and a B, and felt feeling good. I was feeling good about myself. Okay, I'm gonna write a letter to Northridge. I'm ready to come back. They said, no, you don't get it. We don't mean sit out a summer. We mean a semester. You need to really think about things. So I said, okay. So the fall semester, I enrolled at the West Los Angeles Community College and took 3 courses and B's and A's, and wrote a letter back to the school, to Northridge, and they said, okay, come on back. Now at this point, when I came back to Northridge, I was mad because I felt like, what are they doing to me? Like it was their fault. You know, it's the institution's fault, because, you know, the reason why they told me to go home is because of something they did, not something I did. It wasn't their fault. It was my fault. I had to own up to that, and man up and own up to that. And once I did, I went back mad. I said, okay, there's a predominantly white institution. I was coming from the inner city. Cal State Northridge is in the Valley. The Valley is a place, when I was growing up in the hood, you bus your kids out to the Valley to go to a better school. And so Northridge was a little intimidating when I arrived, because this school was in the Valley, and this is where education is supposed to be better and the challenges are supposed to be better. But I went back angry, and I went back ready to show that I could turn this around and achieve a certain level of success in the halls of academia. Now, I remember my freshman year, there was a brother by the name of Tony Waters. He was in student government. And I remember one day, I didn't know him, but I knew of him. And he walked out of class. He was a big brother. And he walked out of class one day, and I'm walking down the hallway, and as a young freshman, and he says, you know what I just did, young brother? I said, no. He said, I just set the curve in my class. I got the highest grade. That's what it's about. And I'm the only Black person in my class, and I got the highest grade. That's what it's about, young brother. That's what you got to do. And I remember standing there in the hallway with my eyes wide open, thinking, oh, what is this dude on? But when I came back after sitting out a semester, his words were in my spirit. And came back, made the dean's list, and at the end, to kind of put a ribbon on this box, when I graduated, I was honored to be one of the speakers at our graduation. Well, we had the regular graduation, then we had a Black graduation. So the Pan-African Studies Department had a Black graduation, and I was the student speaker, one of 2 student speakers at the Black graduation, and received the Outstanding Black College Graduate Award from Cal State University Northridge. And so that was very important for me. That was a good turning point, joining Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, another positive part of that journey. So by the time I arrived, after I graduated from Northridge, I got a job working for Johnson & Johnson Baby Company. And about a year working there, I just, kind of received, I believe there was this call into the ministry to do something more, to do something different than work in corporate America for a Fortune 500 company. It was great expense account and opportunity to excel, but that really wasn't what I wanted to do. I was still searching. Did I want to go to law school, get into politics? I wasn't sure. And then this call in the ministry really interrupted everything. And that's what sent me to Washington, D.C. to study at Howard University School of Divinity. And so by the time I, got to Howard and then years later at Princeton, all the hard work had already been done at Cal State Northridge. And Howard was great because it was a wonderful place to be, to walk on a college campus and know that the professors really have taken serious interest in their students, that they looked at us as if we were their children. And so they were tough on us if we were out of line, certainly at the undergrad level, probably more so. But at the graduate level too, it was wonderful to see African-American professors, a lot of them, and who were smart, who were committed to their process, who were investing in us, who had achieved success. They were great role models, and it was a great environment to be in and to study theology in that kind of context. And Princeton Theological Seminary was a great moment too. But I worked hard and I studied hard, but that's because I learned how to do that in my early years at Cal State Northridge.
That's amazing. And after studying seminary, what made you want to become an Army chaplain?
Well, the Army chaplain, really after I graduated from Howard Divinity, and I was there for the master's and doctorate program. And when I graduated, I was still working on Capitol Hill. Eventually, I left to become executive director of Sojourners Neighborhood Center in Washington, D.C. It was a community-based academic cultural enrichment center down the street from a high school called Cordoza High, which is the high school Marvin Gaye went to. And so it was in the Columbia Heights community of Washington, D.C., and it's another community that's undergoing a flip, if you will. But I did that for about a couple of years, and then I was called to pastor a church in Smithfield, Virginia, in Little Zion Baptist Church. And it was there that it was a small town, great folk, learned so much about ministry. The old folk there taught me how to be a pastor. I replaced a pastor that had been at the church for 42 years. And I thought, I don't know if I'll be here for 42 years. That's a long time in a small town. And I'm coming from, kind of the big city. But there was a reason why I was there. And at that time, I was married and went through a very difficult divorce during that time as well. I hit a low moment in my life. And that was a time period in my journey. I actually thought about leaving the ministry, or that maybe it was just a marriage that just didn't work. And I was in a situation that was probably too much to deal with and handle. And looking back, there were things I could have done better. But at that point, I knew that it was time for me to move on. And I started thinking about just kind of another line of work to do, really. I said, well, maybe I'll go back and work with Johnson & Johnson Baby Company, or maybe I'll go back and work on Capitol Hill. And a good friend of mine who I went to Howard with, Divinity School with, was serving as an Army chaplain. He said, Jim, you should come into the Army chaplaincy program and try for a couple of years just to kind of see if you like it. And I did. And 2 years kind of into my time in the Army, I was deployed to Baghdad, Iraq. And before we deployed, I had already told myself I was going to get out after we redeployed from Iraq. But while I was in Iraq, 6 months into the deployment, I knew that this is where I needed to be. And it's strange because you got to remember, and when I was in graduate school in the early 90s, we were protesting, student protests, out in front of the White House against the Persian Gulf War. This is 1990, 89, 90, that time period, 91. We were out protesting, saying, give peace a chance, and burning candles and holding candles in the air. And then fast forward, here I am in 2005. 2003, I come into the chaplain corps. In 2005, I'm in Baghdad, Iraq. I'm on a Black Hawk helicopter flying through Iraq with two gunners, in the helicopter. And I'm going to go visit somebody who was wounded And I'm asking myself, how did I end up in this situation? How is it that the very thing that here I am in a war-torn country doing ministry. And we used to sing a song in the Baptist church at Mount Carmel Missionary Baptist Church in Los Angeles, I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. Well, now I was really on the battlefield. And be careful about the songs you pick to sing, because they'll come true. But that experience taught me that where God leads, God provides. He will provide. And it was really more about, regardless of how I thought about the politics of war, it was really about those men and women serving who needed a word, who needed to be free to express and practice their faith, who needed a safe place, a safe office to walk into and cry when they weren't sure about what they were doing in this war zone that they were deployed to. They needed a safe place to let their hair down. And we needed men and women in ministry who were able to be there for them. It's almost as if God is saying, I need some strong men and women to serve here. If you want to do it, I'm here and I will help you do it. If not, then there's another ministry someplace else for you. It's almost what the voice of God was kind of saying, at least to me. And so it became a place for me to really give back, especially to a lot of young people. Military is comprised of, the 20 and 30 something crowd. I mean, I always tell folks, make no mistake, change happens in our nation because of young people, whether they're protesting in the 60s and marching, and whether they're the young Black Panther movement, those are young people. The civil rights movement, your freedom riders, your all of those young people who were going to jail in massive numbers, Martin Luther King, John Lewis, and other heroes and sheroes of the civil rights movement, young people. If we look at our wars, for every campaign, it's always been young people who are carrying the heavy load, who are doing the heavy lifting. And so in the military, it's the same case as young people who are out there on the front line. And so to be there for them during their time of need has been remarkable and been a blessing. And so I'm honored that I've been able to be there for 18 and a half years now. And I've learned a lot about myself. It's made me a better minister, a better preacher, a better father, a better husband, and a better person. And soon, that door will come to an end and we'll do something else.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time, Dr. Key. I really appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure.